Hey, this is Joseph with another video. And the last time out, I was focusing on 1975, 50 years ago, the top albums from my collection from 1975. And I thought I would continue with that train of thought, going down perhaps some different years. And I thought instead of moving a year forward, I would move a year back and look at 1974. And these are perhaps going to be under the radar albums. Might be not the most popular albums out there, but they're definitely some of the favorites from my collection. And so hope you see something that's of interest here. Maybe you've never heard of before. First of all, I got Brian Auger's Oblivion Express Straight Ahead. And this is on the Dynaflex RCA label. And Brian Auger is a keyboard player, organ player from the United Kingdom. He got his start in the 1960s, part of the British scene, and he branched out into, well, he was always primarily a jazz organist, but he was involved in rock music also. And in the 70s, he started a group called Brian Auger's Oblivion Express. And this is their second album. And it includes rather unknown personnel, but really excellent players in their own right. It's Barry Dean on bass guitar, Jack Mills on guitar, Lennox Langton, and Steve Ferrone, who would go on to play with the Average White Band, and a timbal player named Mirza Al-Sharif. But I really enjoyed listening to all these albums the last couple of days. I really took a deep dive in giving them a closer listen. And it's almost like comfort food, because these were some of my favorite albums at the time that they were released. And actually what's kind of ironic is when I restarted my collection about eight years ago, this was one of the first albums that I repurchased. And Brian Auger's Oblivion Express, the first album, is really, really outstanding. It's got Compared to What and Inner City Blues, Marvin Gaye song. But this one is solid in its own right. And it starts off with a song called Beginning Again. And right away, right out of the gate, you're going to hear some outstanding percussion, great conga playing by Lennox Langton, and timbal playing by, who I just mentioned, Mirza Al-Sharif. But right after that, you're going to hear the beautiful Fender Rhodes sound of Brian's keyboard playing. And throughout, even though Brian is primarily known as an organ player, on this album and the album before that, his Fender Rhodes is right up there with some of the most funkiest, best, in my humble opinion, right up there with Herbie and Chick. But he really, really shines on the Fender Rhodes. After Straight Ahead, the opener, they get into a song by Wes Montgomery, Bumpin' on Sunset. And when I first heard Bumpin' on Sunset back in the day, I was maybe bemused, because it's such a slow groove. It's slow and slower, but it burns. It burns beyond compare. It's really hard to describe it, and finally it builds up in tension. And it's a great take on the song by Wes Montgomery. And at the very end, guitarist Jack Mills gets into octaves, as great Wes Montgomery did. But side 2 continues on with some smoking cuts, one called Straight Ahead, Change, and a beautiful slow ballad type song called You'll Stay in My Heart. And it has some more great Fender Rhodes from Brian, and it's a great way to end the album. But this is definitely some cheap heat. Brian Auger's Oblivion Express, Straight Ahead. Next up, we got Flora Purim, Stories to Tell. And this is on the Milestone label. And this one, there's Flora in the back. And this is, I believe, her second album on Milestone. And great backing here. Flora, of course, is the Brazilian singer who was the wife of her husband, Airto Moreira, who was a great percussionist who played with Miles and many, many, many people throughout the years. But here, Flora is backed up by her husband, Airto, George Duke, who's all over the place on keyboards here. And one of the things that really drew my attention as I was listening to this album the last couple of days was the beautiful bass playing, whether on the opening cut, the title cut by Miroslav Vitus. Of course, he's the great bass player that was the original bass player in Weather Report, and he would go on to do many other great projects on ECM and those kind of things. But here he has a great sounding big full body bass, and also throughout the album you also hear the great master Ron Carter. But like I say, the title cut, Stories to Tell, is a song by Miroslav, and it's got beautiful vocals by Flora. She's always been one of my favorite Brazilian singers. She's got such a sweet, pure voice, but then she can really scat and do vocalese that very extraordinary, unlike any other vocalist I've ever heard. And back in the 70s, she was right up there in the jazz polls as one of the top female vocalists. She recently, I believe, retired. Her and Airto both are up in age. But another standout here is Search for Peace. It's a McCoy Tyner, a ballad, and Flora's vocals are just so pure and no vibrato. It almost reminds me somewhat of Miles on trumpet. Really, really beautiful. And another outstanding feature of this album is some great trombone playing by the Brazilian trombonist Raul de Souza. Side 2 is a song called Silver Sword, another Miroslav song, and that one has an outstanding guitar solo by Carlos Santana, who she would show up even on a couple of Santana's albums, also her and Airto. So really beautiful album, ends in a slow song, O Cantador. And one thing I have to say about Flora is one time when I was at a Grateful Dead concert, I believe it was in the 1980 at the Long Beach Arena, I was just grooving to the Dead and all that, and it was the drums section of the concert where, of course, it's all percussion, Mickey and Billy. And all of a sudden I heard some weird chanting by a female and a male. It sounded like in a different language. And I look up to the stage, and it's none other than Flora and Airto jamming with the Dead. And so that was really a remarkable experience. They were good friends with Mickey Hart, and they would show up throughout the years. I think at Long Beach. I think they also showed up at the Berkeley at the Greek Theater. But you can't go wrong with any of Flora's albums on Milestones. This one and the first top 3 or 4 are all great. She would later on move on to Warner Brothers and have a long, great career, go on sing with Dizzy Gillespie, among others. But Flora Purim, Stories to Tell. Now this one might seem kind of strange. Who is this guy on the cover? Well, it's Gil Evans, and the Gil Evans Orchestra plays the music of Jimi Hendrix. Here's the back cover, Gil standing in front of the keyboard. And this is also on the orange RCA Dynaflex label. But what I could tell you about this album is, of course, Gil is the famous arranger who made many of those, collaborated with Miles Davis on those famous albums from the 50s, Porgy and Bess, Miles Ahead, Sketches of Spain. But in the late 60s or so, him and Jimi Hendrix, actually came up with the idea that they wanted to collaborate on an album. Can you imagine how that would have turned out? But unfortunately, it was never made. Jimi died, and so it was put on the shelf for quite a few years. But this was, I think this was recorded in 1973. So Gil thought he would go ahead and do the project, of course, without Jimi. Here he's got 2 guitar players playing the guitar parts. One is the great John Abercrombie on guitar, and also the Japanese guitarist Ryo Kawasaki. But this album is very, very interesting, to say the least. It's some of the songs here are Angel the classic Jimmy tune. And what's really outstanding on Angel is the beautiful, funky alto sax of Dave Sanborn, who's quite present throughout the album. Some of the other musicians on here were very typical musicians that appeared with Gil back in the day. Is Bruce Ditmas on drums, Susan Evans congas, Billy Harper, of course. If you're a big jazz fan, you know who Billy Harper is. He's a great tenor player. Howard Johnson is also on tuba and clarinet, and Tom Malone, Tom Bones Malone, who would go on and be made famous in the Blues Brothers movie. Marvin Peterson, the great trumpet player. But after Angel, you hear Crosstown Traffic, Little Miss Lover, and it's kind of strange to hear Marvin Hannibal Peterson sing the lead on that one. But the real highlight here, I believe, is Up from the Skies, and I feel that really fits. That's more one of Jimmy's more jazzy tunes, and Gil does really an outstanding arrangement with both the guitar players trading back and forth as far as on that John Abercrombie and Ryo Kawasaki. But interesting take here. Gil Evans plays the music of Jimi Hendrix. Next up, Maria Muldaur, waitress in the donut shop. And this is Maria's second album on Reprise. Her first album, of course, was the one that contained her big hit, Midnight at the Oasis. But this is Maria's second album on the label, her solo effort. And it's on the Orange Reprise label. But this is really a wonderful album also. One of the things that jumps right out at you on the opening cut is it's a song called Sweetheart. And she's backed up by a big band, and it's arranged by the great jazz master Benny Carter, jazz legend, and killer band here. It's got Benny and Harry Sweets Edison on trumpet, Snooky Young on trumpet, Plaz Johnson on tenor, Sahib Shihab, of course, the great sax player, and some wonderful, beautiful playing on piano by Roger Calloway. Also in the rhythm section, it's Ray Brown, and also on some of the other cuts, it's Shelly Manne. But a great album. Maria is really an American treasure, American music treasure. She can sing it all. She can sing jazz, she can sing blues, she can sing country, she can sing gospel. And here, all those really shine, all those different cuts, and it's all over the map, but it still hangs together very well as an album. But like I say, the jazz tunes are some of my favorites. It's she also does the title cut. It's a Dan Hicks song, "Waitress in the Donut Shop." A lot of fun lyrics. Of course, it's a Dan Hicks song. She also does Honey Babe Blues with Doc Watson on guitar, and a Wendy Waldman song. If you're not familiar with Wendy Waldman, she was very big in the LA singer. She did some songs for Linda Ronstadt, but she sings a song called Gringo in Mexico here, and it's really wonderful. And I really like the closing gospel tune called Traveling Shoes, and it's an a cappella song with Maria going a cappella with a couple other singers. But Maria Muldaur also had some Grateful Dead roots. She would sing with Jerry Garcia band as a backup singer on a couple of his dates at one point. But Maria still is active today, still singing and releasing albums. And I have to say that when most guys in their high school years had maybe Linda Ronstadt posters on their wall or Stevie Nicks, I had a poster of Maria on my wall because she was quite the looker. And anyways, Maria Muldaur, waitress in the donut shop. Now we go to someone that you probably never heard of, and it's called Azuquita y su Balao in Hollywood. And this is a salsa album. There's the back cover. And it's on a label called E&G, a very minor label, obviously. But Azuquita is a salsa singer from I believe from Panama. And actually, One of the songs here is dedicated to the great Roberto Duran, the famous Panamanian boxer who was really a great boxer during the 70s. And Azuquita is a wonderful vocalist. Here he opens up with the song called El Telefono, which is a lot of fun. And great band here. Among some of the people on the band is Manny Oquendo on timbales, Jerry Gonzalez on congas. Of course, Jerry Gonzalez would go on to make some great Latin jazz albums, and he's also a great trumpet player. He recently passed a couple years ago. Oscar Bashir is another trumpet player on here, and the great Victor Paz really playing some outstanding solos and great lead trumpet. But the standout cut for me is No Pienses Así. It's a beautiful bolero, and it was also done by Eddie Palmieri. But I used to hang out a lot back in the day with the great Poncho Sanchez, the great conga player that would go on to play with Cal Tjader and his own band. But I would hang out with Poncho, and we would listen to a lot of music, jazz and salsa. And towards the end of the evening, after downing a couple beers, get kind of a little sentimental, and I'd always tell him to play No Pienses Así, the beautiful romantic bolero, and it's got such a outstanding soprano sax solo by, I believe it's Mario Rivera. But really love that song, that version. But great salsa album, Azuquita y Su Melao in Hollywood. And finishing up here, Luis Gasca, Born to Love You. And this is on the Brown Fantasy label. Here's the back cover, Luis. It looks like he's in a Japanese garden. But if you're not familiar with Luis Gasca, maybe you've heard him in one way or another, because he was really active in the 70s, backing up all kinds of great, especially rock artists. But he's had such a varied career. He was part of Janis Joplin's band after she broke up Big Brother, after she left Big Brother. And he was also did a lot of work with Santana. He was part of the first Malo album with Jorge Santana, and also worked with Van Morrison, but many others. But he released a couple outstanding albums on his own. Of course, his first album, which is on the Blue Thumb label, For Those Who Chant, it's kind of a Latin version, Latinized Bitches Brew. But here he's really an outstanding, and backed up by some outstanding musicians, as he always was. But here you got the likes of course, Luis on trumpet, Joe Henderson, Hadley Calaman on tenors, Jack DeJohnette on electric piano and on drums, a great piano player called Mark Levine, who was very active in the San Francisco area at the time, Victor Pantoja. But some of the best cuts here is a Latinized version of A Love Supreme. And also, he does a version of McCoy Tyner's Search for Peace that I also heard on the Flora Purim album. Beautiful, beautiful song. And also Samba para San Francisco, which has got some outstanding trumpet playing by Luis. And the beautiful Just Say Goodbye, which was recorded on the first Malo album, but also recorded in the 60s by Mongo Santa Maria. But you can't go wrong with any of Luis's albums on Fantasy. He also has one album on Atlantic, I believe from 1969, called Little Giant, that is also outstanding. So anyways, that's a look at 1974, some of the top under the radar albums from my collection. Let me know what some of your favorite under the radar 74s are. And hope you liked the video. Like, subscribe. Until next time, Joseph out.